I'm Cathy Marston. I'm a choreographer. I'm currently in the studios of Le Grand Ballet Canadien in Montreal, creating a ballet on Lady Chatterley's Lover. But in early 2019, I'm going to be in Leeds working with Northern Ballet on a new full-length dance piece called Victoria. It's based on Queen Victoria, and about, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, David Nixon, the director of Northern Ballet, got in touch with me and said, would this be something that I'd be interested to create? And I thought, wow, yes, I can understand why he's interested in making a ballet or commissioning a ballet on Victoria. But I wanted to get more deeply into the subject because, of course, the exciting thing about Queen Victoria is that there is a wonderful love affair with Albert, and there is intrigue and mystery surrounding her, but it's actually getting on for 100 years of world history. When you really look at Victoria, that's how far her life spanned, and so many things happened during that time. I'm working with a dramaturg called Uzma Hamid, and the first thing that we did was get these wedges of books and start reading everything we could about her personal life, about the times, the Victorian era, about the Industrial Revolution, the things that happened in the world, about the empire, and also about her family. I wanted to find an approach to her which wouldn't be all-encompassing. There's way too much for one evening of ballet in this theme, so I needed to find my way in. And I found it reading about her family. I was very curious when I heard about her youngest child, Princess Beatrice. Now, Beatrice was only 3 years old when Albert, her father, died. And apparently, on the night that Albert died, Victoria ran to her bedroom and gathered Beatrice in her arms and took her to bed, wrapping her in Albert's dressing gown. And more or less didn't let go of her ever again. Beatrice became Victoria's closest companion. And when Victoria died in 1901, she charged Beatrice with the task of editing all of her letters and diaries, which was enormous because Victoria wrote a huge amount. So over 30 years, Beatrice reviewed, edited, and copied out all of Victoria's diaries and burnt the originals. So what we have today, as what we, I suppose, would consider first-hand evidence of Victoria's life, is actually through the filter of Beatrice. And that I found fascinating, not only because it's through someone else's eyes, but it's the mother-daughter relationship that's involved in that. And I thought, wow, this perspective of a daughter on a mother's life, and not just any mother, but Queen Victoria's life, is absolutely fascinating. And so this is the lens with which I've chosen to study Victoria through ballet. So we'll see Queen Victoria's life portrayed in dance, but through Beatrice's viewpoint. We start at the point when Victoria dies, and Beatrice has lost her mother. And I suppose at that point, probably many children would look back on their parents' life as they go through their belongings. But Beatrice had this bigger task in hand, to go through Victoria's life through her diaries. And so as she goes into what we're imagining is a sort of space, a royal archive, we see her both discovering her mother, things that she didn't know, discovering her father, who she hardly knew at all, but also remembering moments of her mother's life. The scenario looks at Victoria's life in two halves, and one could argue that there are really two women in Victoria's life. So she was a very different person as a younger woman than the person she became after Albert's death, as Victoria the widow, who only ever wore black. We tell it in reverse, so because Beatrice remembers her mother as a widow in black, she starts at the point of her mother's death and remembers this later period of Victoria's life. And then only when Beatrice herself becomes a widow, she wants to discover, but who was her mother before that black dress? What was under the black dress? And then she goes back into the early diaries and meets her father, who she only knew until she was 3 years old. So she discovers the relationship of Victoria and Albert, the relationship of Victoria and her own mother. I would like the audience to be moved by what they see in Victoria, partly by Beatrice's journey. Beatrice is essentially our narrator, and it's the story of a daughter discovering her mother and coming to terms with their relationship and essentially releasing her mother and her mother's story to the world. I mean, Victoria's story is very public, her life was very public. And so, like the life of any of the royal family, there's this great contrast between private moments and public moments. And I think witnessing the tension between those moments and those relationships is moving. The music for Victoria will be written by Philip Feeney. It's an entirely original score. Philip and I have worked many times together, often on ballets which use some existing music, for example in Jane Eyre, where we anchored the piece in Fanny Mendelssohn, but Philip wrote other music around that. This will be all new. We will refer to some of the music of that period. There will be looking back, a sense of the period, but also a contemporary feel to convey the emotional journey, I suppose, of the protagonists. The design is by Stefan Affing, and Stefan and I worked on an opera, King Roger, together at the Royal Opera House, and then subsequently Dangerous Liaisons for the Royal Danish Ballet. He's an amazing designer, and he's made gorgeous costumes which refer to Victoriana, the Victorian period, but not in absolute detail. There's a contemporary twist to it, which I think is important in dance because we want to see the body. So that's going to be beautiful. So I'm really excited to be working with Northern Ballet again. It will be the 4th ballet that I've created for that company, and every time it gets better. The dancers are so well trained, if that's the right word, in telling stories with their bodies. It's an absolute pleasure to discover character with them in rehearsal and then bring it to stage and see the emotional worlds of these different historical people come to life. I really, really am looking forward to the beginning of 2019.